Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Toto Wolff and Lewis Hamilton have given their latest perspective on the development of the W14B, as some are dubbing it, that's going to arrive in Imola in a few races' time. Toto Wolff says what they showed in Australia is just the tip of the iceberg for all the performance upgrades to come. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. Got to 21,000 subs as well yesterday, so love to see that one. Firstly, a remarkable and very frustrating story that these news magazines ran it again. So there was a news article, I don't know if you guys saw this yesterday, but it's been a big topic over the last 24 hours, that this article was posted. I didn't exactly know German, but I'm sure you guys can get the general picture of what this is saying. It's a supposed interview with, I mean, I can't believe they would actually do this. These magazines are simply built different. But it's a AI-generated interview with Michael Schumacher as to what he might reply, like if an AI, like a character.ai, I think they used some websites, and they came up with an AI-generated interview, and they said, wow, this sounds pretty legit. And it was portrayed by the magazine as if this was actually an interview. Now, unfortunately, it isn't, right? But, I mean, this is just absolutely outrageous. I've never seen anything like this before, and there were various answers on what Schumacher's AI would potentially have said, and it's just shocking for many reasons, and for good reason. His family is now taking legal action against said German magazine after it ran said interview that was generated by AI. So, just a ridiculous story. I don't know, like, Schumacher seems to be on these magazines every week or so, as unfortunate as that is, and this is a new low, I think. So congratulations to said German magazine. Speaking of all the bombshells coming out of Domenico the last few days from the Formula 1 side, just wanted to mention another one, talking about a Grand Prix in London. He says, why not? It would be great. We are ready to discuss it because London is where we have the offices, so it would not be bad. Easy commuting, he says. So, I mean, I can't, honestly, I'm fed up with this guy. I can't lie to you. I mean, we talked just yesterday about whether Silverstone will continue on the Grand Prix circuit in the next few years, and he wants a London, presumably, right, street circuit track again. It's like, oh my god, please stop. I know there were some rumours today that we were going to go to 24 races on the Canada next year, and they don't want to push beyond that, but they certainly have the appetite to for many countries and, well, places around the world. London is obviously keen, but if London happens, like a street circuit in London, what happens to Silverstone? I don't know. I don't even want to think about it, to be honest. Let's talk Mercedes, though, because lots of discussions from Lewis Hamilton about the Red Bull progress and how they can catch up. We know they're bringing a very different aesthetically version of their car in a few races' time, but Toto Wolff also says they're bringing new things every Grand Prix. I believe he said just a couple of weeks ago that they weren't going to do too much between now and the Imola upgrades, but it turns out that's actually a different story, and they're bringing many new things, possibly as preparation or possibly just to get a better understanding. They did it last year in Austin, where they brought a big upgrade package that was, not really intended to improve the performance so much of the W13, but it was more so to clarify that what they're working on for the W14 was correct. Turns out they might not have really nailed that one, but that was the intention, and it might be something similar coming soon as well. Now, Hamilton also discusses the Red Bull because they are a long way ahead. Mercedes need to get their development curve absolutely rapid compared to Red Bull, and they need to hope the Red Bull stagnate to a certain degree, and that's what Hamilton gets at, right? I'm aware that it could take a long time to catch that car. If you look at the Red Bull, it's going to continue to evolve most likely. We hear that there's a 0.2 of a second upgrade Red Bull are bringing in Baku, and that circuit's already going to be very good for them, so pretty scary. Although some cars do plateau in terms of performance, when you get to some point, it just can't keep going. There's obviously a limit of what is possible with the present regulations. Red Bull are by far the closest, but there's still performance the Red Bull, I'm sure, think they can gain. Next year's car is likely going to be a further evolution of this year's car, so there's more to come from the Red Bull, but it's diminishing returns at some point, right? They can't keep advancing their car. Like, Red Bull can't keep bringing 0.3 of a second upgrade to their car. Eventually, there has to run out of performance, you would think at least. So as he says, sometimes the cars plateau, but maybe they can. It's got a great team around them. They've got a great team around them, so I'm sure they'll continue to add downforce. We've got to make sure that when we do make the change, hopefully the job isn't too far away and they can get significantly closer, and it's going to take us the rest of the year for sure to close that gap potentially. So he does reckon, Hamilton, that it's going to take until maybe Brazil again where they can actually try and fight for a win, but that's maybe not a massive surprise given the state of the Mercedes. Now, are Mercedes downplaying their kind of a gap to performance? Maybe. Alonso certainly seems to think so. I'm not so convinced because I think Red Bull have got more in the tank. Mercedes might be more competitive than they appeared over certainly the first two races, but that doesn't really mean that they're anywhere near Red Bull. A part of me is hopeful that we'll find the trick, which, kind of interesting terminology implying that Red Bull have understood something about their car. Maybe it's the DRS activation activation or whatever exactly it is, maybe it's the front suspension, that they're doing different to the opposition that's allowing them to compete. And Aston Martin aren't far away. They just lose all the time in a straight line. Like Aston probably lose like 5/10 on some circuits just in a straight, which is pretty much their delta in terms of performance at times. So, you know, there's something to be said about that. We've shown in the past we can develop quickly, and I hope that's the case as the potential of the car opens up. The guys can go full steam ahead in that direction. I'm grateful that they are open to making a shift and are not being stuck with what we have. So quite interesting that they're, you know, talks about they again, talking about the engineers, wanting them to make a change to the direction, and they are now doing exactly that. And Toto Wolff mentions this as well in quite an interesting thread of questions that he was asked. Mercedes actually published this all themselves, and it's now been discussed more widely in the media. But he talks about the races so far, says, we haven't come out the blocks as we expected. We don't feel any sense of entitlement. It's, you know, the toughest competition in the world. It wouldn't be a fantastic challenge if it was so easy. But I thought this is interesting. In Australia, though, we saw glimpses of performance in our car that encourages us for the next part of the season. They were more competitive there than they have been anywhere so far. Hamilton, of course, P2 in the end. And Russell probably would have completed the podium had he not had the reliability problem, but also the red flag that happened early on. In terms of car development, it's encouraging to see that within 3 races, we understand the car much better. We have defined a clear direction where we need to go, and I believe we are on the right trajectory. We need to consolidate this understanding. Hopefully over the next few races, we can make another step. It is important to also keep on track and not oscillate too much between exuberance and depression. He said this quite a few times lately, but as he says here, they're on the right direction now. They have defined that clear direction. They understand the car much better. And, well, look, for Mercedes' case, they're going to have to hope that this time their clear direction they want to move in is actually the correct one. And they certainly need it to be if they want any hope of competing this season and possibly for the next seasons as well. Now, this is also the tip of the iceberg comment I wanted to mention because it's quite an interesting terminology. What he might be referring to here, because as he says, the machine is continuing to run in Brixworth and Brackley at a fast pace. What you see on track is only the tip of the iceberg, but the performance of the car and the power unit is made in these 2 factories. They're kind of saying that what you see on track, what you see in terms of performance, is just the very top of all the work that goes in behind the scenes. But he also might be implying that whatever's happening behind the scenes right now in terms of development, you're only seeing a piece of that on the track so far, let's say in Australia, whereas there's a lot more going on and a lot more upgrades to bring, as he also mentions here in a second. The mindset is great to believe 100% in the organisation, never going to win every single year, but then he also mentions Baku and Miami as well. So Baku coming up, Miami just after that, discussing entertaining race, track layout is a challenge for many reasons, and then Imola, where we start the first triple header of the season, where their upgrades are going to arrive. So that's when what we're dubbing the W14B spec, whether they're really going to call it that, I don't know. They might do. We know that it's going to be aesthetically or like aerodynamically substantially different to the current W14, and last year the AMR, well, the AMR 22 became the AMR 22B. Was it in Spain or whenever they brought their big upgrade package, which kind of entirely changed the way their car looked. So they'll probably still call it the W14, but people are almost considering it to be a B-spec version given how much it's meant to be changing. But he also says we are consistently going to be bringing upgrades over the next few races, with just something to look forward to. Now, I believe he said in Australia that this was it for their upgrades until Imola. He was like, yeah, nothing really else is coming until we bring the big one in Imola, but it seems like they're bringing more things over the next few races as well, which, as I said earlier, it's likely they might be doing that as a preparatory kind of perception, because I think even George Russell said maybe we can get this big upgrade ready for Baku, and you know, turns out they decided, you know what, let's just give it another couple of weeks just to ensure we get it right. But there might be some parts that are ready, new front wing, new rear wing, just want to test some things out for when the actual big upgrade arrives. And as he says, there's no magic bullet that transforms the car. It's about being realistic. Hopefully we see a steady improvement. But pretty interesting, they're bringing multiple upgrades over the next few races, which implies Baku, we might see some new things from Mercedes as well, and then maybe in Miami, but it's tough logistically to make that happen, and certainly in Imola, that's when things really kick on. And then Spain as well, we hear of more things coming down the pipeline for Mercedes, so obviously they'll be hoping it works out. We discussed the other day rumours that maybe they might go down a more Aston Martin direction, which might be wise given their straight line speed is certainly better than the Aston Martin's is, and that is one of the key things the cars will have to address and the teams will have to address. Even Ferrari has spent their kind of spring break here analysing closely what makes the Red Bull so fast in a straight line. It seems like what they're really doing, and this is the triple DRS that people have discussed, is stalling out the beam wing. The way the aero seems to work at the back of the Red Bull, whenever they open the DRS flap, the aero pathing is so well done that the beam wing, which is the wing just below the actual rear wing, so it's kind of, you can't quite see it on this image here, but it's effectively down here. You guys can see it from a rear view version of the car. Basically, this part right here above, so this is the diffuser, and then you got this part up here to the best of my understanding, and they're somehow able to stall the airflow over that and generate what Ferrari think is an extra 8 kph in straight line speed performance purely off enabling them to do this. So this is probably the trick to how they're able to generate all that great straight line speed, and if other teams can also solve this issue, then they also can generate the same great advantage that Red Bull are able to in a straight line. So that's the plan for the other teams going forwards. Just one kind of entertaining thing to close out the video with here. Helmut Marko, of course, a chief advisor really to Red Bull, says that back in 2012 he advised Mercedes and Niki Lauda information to sign Hamilton in late 2012. I gave Niki Lauda some information that Lewis would be available. Of course, I was not being altruistic, right? He wasn't looking out for their best interests. Obviously, he was looking out for his own team's best interest, because at the time, we thought Lewis would be less of a threat to us at Mercedes than at McLaren, for whom he was driving at the time. In retrospect, that was a complete misjudgment, although at the time it was not really foreseeable. But with the knowledge I have today, I would definitely not do that again. So I don't imagine that Hamilton wouldn't have joined Mercedes had Helmut Marko not said to Niki Lauda, like, hey, you want to sign this guy, i.e. your team is bad, sign this guy because he's quite a good driver, so hopefully he won't be a threat to us going forwards. But obviously that was misjudged, and Niki Lauda, I'm sure, knows what Helmut Marko is about. I'm sure he heard the comments and was like, okay, I know what you're trying to play out here, but you know, obviously Niki Lauda was confident in the potential of Mercedes, and Hamilton was as well, and it worked out rather well over the last decade or so. But now Red Bull Racing are back on top for sure. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.